holes in it, which would hold cartridges. Now today I'm using a very historically accurate plastic shotgun shell with masking tape over the top of it. This isn't what an actual cartridge would look like, of course, folks. Now, before I actually put the powder in, there's one thing I have to do. I have to take this part right here, which is called the hammer. If you're British, you call it the cock. If you are French, you call it le dog for some reason, because I guess when you pull it back, it looks a little bit like a rooster head, with the flint making the beak and the screw on the top making the comb, or in this case, the ear of the dog. Now, I'm going to open up my cartridge here. Now, if I was doing this for real, think about this, folks. I've got my left hand holding the gun. I've got the powder in my right hand. How do I open that thing? What do I use?
Mouth.
Specifically, my teeth. Now, that was actually one of the requirements to become a British regular, is you had to have 2 teeth, just 2, but they had to be opposed to each other, folks. You couldn't have one over here and one over here. You were going to gum this thing open, of course, right? Now, once I pop this thing open with my teeth, I'm going to take a small amount of black powder, and I'm going to load it into the pan here. And then I'm going to close this part, which is called the frizzen. The frizzen is the part that will actually strike the flint and make a spark. Now we've arrived at our second and third idioms, because these are ways the gun can misfire. First way it can misfire is, I said I have my my hammer in what position? Half
Cock.
So you don't want your gun to go off half cocked. You've probably heard this before. The other way it can misfire is if I forget to load my shot and my wadding and my powder down the barrel, I could have a flash in the pan. I know, interesting, right? We get all these idioms from it. Now the next step is, with the gun still half cocked, I'm going to bring the butt of the gun down to the ground and dump the rest of the powder down that barrel. Now, folks, I'm not actually going to be firing off a musket ball today. Why? Well, if you want to see an actual piece of evidence, look no further than the window of the Northwest Bastion over there. There's a reason it's boarded up, folks. What was that? No, I didn't do that. No. But in this case, I am going to use a piece of fiber wadding here, which looks a little bit like a cord. I'm going to put that wadding down the barrel. Here's a little joke for you, folks. You know why a British regular is called a regular? Daily dose of fiber, of course. Now, folks, if I was firing this like an actual ranger, if I was out in the woods, I would do a very complicated, multifaceted maneuver called the tap reload. You want to see it? Here it is. Done. That's great, but black powder tends to go off more consistently if it's compressed. So this actually increases the chance of misfire. So I'm going to fire this off like a regular, and I'm going to use this special tool right here. Does anyone know what it's called? Any fans of Super Troopers in the audience? Ramrod. Nobody got that joke. I was hoping somebody would. So I'm going to take my ramrod, I'm going to compress the powder in the shot down, and we are essentially ready to fire. Now, folks, before I do this, I have to talk about 2 things. The first thing is a misconception that people have. Now, again, I asked if some people had seen The Last of the Mohicans. I got some nods. The Patriot, Turn, stuff like that. How many of you folks have ever seen in these movies somebody put the musket ball in their mouth and spit it down the barrel? Okay, that's wrong. Here's why. This is what an actual cartridge that a regular would have looks like. At the top, I got my powder, a little bit of wadding, and at the bottom I have my ball. Now, folks, if I bite the top of this paper cartridge open and use a little bit of the powder in the pan, well, where's my ball? It's all the way at the bottom. So how do I get that into my mouth? Well, the only way to do it would be to shove that whole thing in my mouth. Now I have a mouthful of wadding, black powder, and my ball. Now when I shoot this gun off, the barrel gets to be about, what, 120 degrees or so, Sergeant Fraser? Give or take. Now, folks, do you see any issues with me putting a mouthful of black powder, the shot over a hot gun? Yeah, it would be a good way to lose my 2 remaining teeth, or maybe the entirety of my lower jaw. It wasn't done. Even if I was a ranger and I was carrying loose shot in this bag and using my waterproof powder horn, tell me, why would I put the ball in my mouth to spit it down the barrel? It wasn't done. Remember, gun safety is key. Now, one last thing. This weapon goes into service in 1722. There are 4 different variations of it that are made, with the barrel is basically adjusted in terms of length, but it's officially retired in 1838, which means it has a 116-year-long service record, which is pretty beefy as far as firearms go, especially this one, seeing as how inaccurate it is. Now, folks, around 1811, which is around this thing's 90th birthday, the Brits go, "Oh, you know, that Napoleon fellow is getting a bit naughty on the other side of the channel. We haven't actually tested the accuracy of this gun, so about time we did that, hey chaps?" So that's exactly what they do. They make a European-style battle line with like fake shields. They paint them red and white, and they take pot shots of 100, 200, and 300 yards. Also noting that the maximum effective, double underline, effective range of this weapon is about 350 yards before the penetration power of the ball drops to about nil, which means if you're on the receiving end, you'll get a nasty bruise, but little else. Now, folks, does anyone in this audience want to guess as to the accuracy of this weapon at 100 yards, which is a third of its range in terms of percentages of the shots successfully hit. Any guesses?
Pwede upo ka dito.
Wait, I heard a mumble over there. What was that? Because it sounded like the correct answer. Any other guesses?
25 feet.
24%, I was going to say. But no, it was a little bit more than that. Yes?
30?
It was actually about 53%. So, but that's only at a third of its range. So a skosh over half the shots at a third of this thing's range hit its mark. At 300 feet, it was only about 23%. So pretty craptacular aim. It was about as accurate as the LAPD in 1994, your average Star Wars stormtrooper. Now, like I said, normally we would have about 25 different commands to fire this weapon off, but today, for your sake and entertainment, we are going to reduce it down to 3. Those commands are going to be make ready at which point I will shoulder my firelock, load to full cock, and put it in the present position. We will then say present as the next command. We don't say aim because remember, 53% accuracy at a third of its range. You're basically going to just cross your fingers, point it in the general direction of the enemy, and hope that you hit something. And then the last command, of course, is the most obvious. Say it with me, folks. Or in this case, we've got to use 18th century vernacular, so it will be give fire. Sergeant, would you give me the commands, please, sir?
Take care. Shoulder your firelock. Make ready.
There we go.
Present. Give fire.
Not bad, folks, right? That's a pretty decent boom, but I think we could probably make a bigger one. Would anyone be interested in doing that? Yeah? Love the enthusiasm here, folks. You folks can come, the rest of you can stay. Let's go up to the northeast bastion. See where the corporal's standing up there. Wave, corporal. Or salute, that's better. We're going to go right up here, folks.
Yeah.
Follow me.
Talagang malakas pala yun, no?
Yeah.
Pwede
Saan tayo pinalalakan mo? Saan tayo pumunta?
parang historical pala ito, no?
Historical
It is 75.
Ano pa kasi dito?
Halika na. Hindi naman mahirap ito, hindi katulad kanina. Mas mababa yung agdang na.
I forgot to put sunscreen on.
Yung sunscreen ko, naiwan ko.
And unfortunately, because firearm safety crap, I'm gonna have to get behind the line and stuff. All right, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Northeast Bastion. Apologize about the sun, but if you need some shade, there is a little bit over there if you need it. Now, what you are looking at, folks. Oh, you don't have to cover your ears yet. Your arms are gonna get tired very fast.
Init.
It's gonna be about 2 minutes before we fire it up. Don't worry, young lady. I'll tell you when it's here.
Thank you.
Now, what you are looking at.
We are all
6-pound
folks.
smoothbore bronze steel piece. Folks, why do you suppose we call it a 6-pound?
Ay, dapat kunin nila itong payong, sabihin mo sa kanila.
6-pound what?
You can sit on a cannon, I think.
Maupo ka muna dito.
It is not.
Maupo ka dyan. Kasi punta ako dun. Ay, lubat din.
The cannon itself weighs 6 pounds. If you guess that,
Lubat
you're
ka na
off
din ba?
94 pounds off. This weighs about 2,000
Lubat ka na.
Now, this
Hindi
cannon is made
mahiram.
out of bronze. Bronze is a much more durable metal to make an artillery piece out of. Why? Well, it's a little bit more dense than iron and less
Ay, meron pala akong ano. Hindi pala,
Case in
meron
point,
palang
this was
data.
cast in 1976.
Yung
You
data,
can fire it off
pakilabas mo.
4 to 9 times a day, and it hasn't yet exploded.
Pakilabas mo.
Now, the actual cannons you would see up here would look like that one.
Mababa.
That's an iron 12 pounder. Again, iron is a bit more brittle than bronze, and it has a much shorter lifespan in terms of use, about 100 shots before the thing has to be fired. Now, as a matter of fact, the gun crews that ran the cannons would usually hold a metal stylus with them, and they would make tally marks on the edge of the cannon to make sure they knew exactly how many
Yung
times
payong
the
ko
shots were
pa.
fired off. Now, this fort, during the siege in 1757,
Yung
which actually
kailangan
started
ng
today, believe it or not, about, 263 years ago, if I'm doing my math, today, if you look over the back, what was that, Corporal?
Ganda ng view. Magpa-picture tayo din
Yeah, I
mamaya.
think so. If you look over the bastion walls, I'm sorry you folks said at the exact wrong time, you'll see over there the steeple pointing out of the trees. That's the old courthouse. That is where the first French siege line was built, and they will over the next 6 days advance to within about 250 yards of this fort.
Ito yung canyon nila noon, no? Lumang-luma.
Kind of weird to think about when you're looking at an old French siege line, right? Now, folks, do you suppose that the provincials and the regulars here at this fort were going to become
Pinakalawang na.
level-headed in the middle of combat? No, of course not. Yes, some of them, they were 16 to 22 years old. Some of them had never seen a European style siege before. So they are scared out of their minds. Now, like I said, this cannon is equipped with 17 iron cannons. They are going to let rip with all 17 of those suckers, and they are not allowing it the 6-minute OSHA-approved cool down. Oh my God, cool down period, at which point these cannons are going to start to glow red hot because they are firing them so regularly. But it gets better, folks, because then somebody gets the genius idea to run down to that well in the parade ground, gets buckets of ice-cold water, and dump them on the red-hot iron cannons. Now, I heard some laughing over there. Why are you laughing? What happens when you dump ice-cold water on red-hot iron? What happens?
Steam.
Well, steam, of course, but what happens to the metal? The metal starts to crack, right? So you get metal fatigue. At which point, when you try to fire off the cannon again, it explodes. Now, folks, some of you are probably going, isn't the whole point of a cannon to explode? Well, yes, but not into the audience, and that's exactly what happens. 11 of those iron cannons are going to explode over the course of that 6-day siege. Now, take into account, folks, that each of these cannons would have a 6-man gun crew. That means if 11 exploded, if we're doing our math correctly, that 66 men either lost their lives outright or were maimed to the point where there were no military value to this fort whatsoever before the French really had fired a shot on this fort. So there's a reason we lost it, folks. Also, a lot of folks ask why. Why do we only have iron cannons if bronze was so much stronger? Well, think about this, folks. The French and Indian War is the North American theater of the 7 Years' War. So there's fighting in Europe, they're fighting in Pondicherry in India, they're fighting in Senegal and Africa and the Caribbean. So they're fighting all over the place. Do you think they're going to want to send their best field pieces over to the red-headed steppe kids? Exactly. That is why we are saddled with these things here. Now, the second difference, why you wouldn't have not seen this type of cannon on the fort is the actual chassis that it's sitting on, this part right here. This is a field chassis. Now, folks, where do you suppose we would use a field chassis? Oh, thank God he got it right. Yes, in the field. It's the old who's buried in Grant's tomb question, right? And who is buried in Grant's tomb? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. You hesitated there for a minute, young man. That's an old social studies trick question, so remember that one. Now, this is used in a field because it's very easily maneuvered on flat ground. You have these big spoke wheels, and you have this nice sled. Now, if we were firing this thing off for real, we would be using a 6-pound shot, which would be in a canister very much like this, with about 2 pounds of black powder down there. But if we fired it off for real, the recoil of this thing would be about 8 to 13 feet, in which case you folks would be spending your dinner a little bit flatter than you are right now. But it wouldn't necessarily be you folks who get flattened. It could be you. It could even be you over there, because remember, it's a smoothbore cannon, so who knows what direction it's going to recoil in. Now, I did have a gentleman from New Jersey who came up here one day. He had the brilliant idea, and I'm sorry if this is your home state, folks, but he goes, why don't you just put a hole at the bottom of it and put the sled in it? That'll stop the recoil. And I said, sir, clearly you fell asleep in high school physics, because that doesn't stop the recoil. It just turns it into a giant rocket-powered lever, in which case it's going to crush you rather than roll over the top of you. But joking aside, folks, think about this. In a field, could that actually happen? Think about this. If you're an artillerist and there's a rock behind there that you didn't see, or a root, or even a small divot in the ground, that thing could still skip over that thing, get catapulted into the air, fall end over end, and still kill its entire 6-man gun crew, right?
Yeah.
Fun times in the 18th century. Now I got a question for you folks. Let's say that I run out of cannonballs. What could I use as an alternative? Just shout it out. Any ideas? What was that? Rocks are always a great choice. What else?
Shrapnel.
What was that?
Shrapnel.
Yeah, well, shrapnel is technically could be rocks, it could be pieces of metal, pieces of porcelain. Corporal, any ideas?
There's a nice piece of chain.
Ooh, chain's great against the masts of ships. What else could I use? Anyone see Pirates of the Caribbean 1? What did they use in that? Yeah, silverware. That's always a good thing. Sports, especially when it gets stuck in Mackenzie Crook's eye. Matter of fact, even though shrapnel would reduce the overall range of this thing, it was deadly effective. As a matter of fact, William Eyre would note in his journals carving lanes, streets, and alleyways through the French troops during the Battle of Lake George in 1755, which is kind of grisly. But there is an even more grisly description of a soldier going up against chain shot, or rather, I should say, shrapnel. One of them describes a French soldier disappearing from the neck to the knees. Right? Now, one last thing before we fire this off, folks. The range, I haven't talked about that. If you look through the gun port, over there you'll see a lovely American flag billowing in the breeze in front of a brindle-colored building. That is, as one of our corporals likes to describe it, Le Chateau de Holiday Inn. Any of you folks staying there? You are? All right, well, we're going to try and improve the ventilation system, but hopefully we don't hit your room. Unless you want to have a nice open concept thing, you know what I'm saying? Now, that's also about half our effective range, about 750 yards away. So as a matter of fact, the effective range of this is about 1,300 to 1,500 yards. Now, one last thing, folks. Keep in mind, I would normally have a 6-man gun crew, but I just have one dashing Scotsman instead. So hopefully he does his job well. Fingers crossed. Now the first thing he's going to do is he's going to search the piece with his worm screw, which is that coiled piece of iron right there, making sure any of the pieces of the shot that we previously fired have been dispelled. The next thing he is going to do is he's going to take his ramrod and he's going to spring it. Listen closely. Hear that bell tone? That should be able to be heard over the din of battle, and that's very important because that lets us know that the tube is clear. Now what he's going to do is he's going to charge the piece. As he's doing that, I'm going to plug the vent hole with my thumb. This is very important because this helps smother any sparks by creating a vacuum inside of the actual chamber. Also, I should note my thumb would usually be covered with like a leather thing to prevent me from burning the pad of my thumb off. Now, if this did generate a spark, if I didn't have my thumb over the vent hole, well, that charge is going off and it's sending that ramrod along with Corporal's arm about 75 yards out into the battlefield. He's expendable, but that ramrod is a bit expensive, and I sure as heck don't want to get it, especially have to dodge Native American sniper fire in the process. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, which is called my gunner's pick. This is made out of iron. Remember, iron pick, bronze cannon. What don't you see? Look closely, folks.
Spark.
Sparks, exactly. If I was using an iron cannon, the pick would be made out of brass, bronze, or copper.
Ganyan din tayo dun sa Pilipinas, kawayan lang.
And that's that. Then, how old are you, my friend? Yeah. Ooh, he'd be perfect. What about you in the orange shirt?
10.
You're 10? You'd be perfect, powder monkeys. Now, this job would normally be done by you, but don't actually come up here because Cuomo doesn't want you handling black powder. Now, a powder monkey is an 8 to 12-year-old
Yung
boy
pala yung
sold to
pumutok
the military
kanina.
by his parents because one less mouth to feed and, you know, a few more cents in your pocket, right? But of course, this job is quite dangerous. Why do we call you a powder monkey? Because you have to be nimble and quick.
Ganyan yung
like a
pinapaputok
monkey.
natin sa Pilipinas.
And you are
Parang
also
kanyan pag
basically
New Year,
dodging
yung kanyon, yung
sniper
kawayan.
fire. Fun times, right?
Kalburo.
Now, again, the job of the young men was incredibly dangerous. It would not be uncommon to see a few powder monkeys missing toes, arms, hands, feet, stuff like that. Again, fun times in the 18th century, right? Now, as I am priming the vent hole, the corporal over here has prepared his linstock. Now, linstock is a fancy Dutch term for matchstick, and as you can see, there's about 3 feet of coiled hempen rope at the end of that thing. This would have been soaked overnight in a solution of water and saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate, one of the 3 components of gunpowder. And this creates something that we call slow match, because it is A, a match, and B, burn slowly. I know we're very creative with names here, folks. This would burn at about 8 foot per hour, and it can be used all day over the course of a single battle. But again, before it burned down once in 1757, and again in the 60s when an arsonist lit it on fire, I don't want to be the cause of the 3rd time, so in this case, we're using a few inches of cannon fuse. Used in model rockets, it makes a really cool, wily, coyote-sounding hiss noise when we set it off. It's a lot of fun. Now, folks, there are going to be 3 commands to fire off this cannon, similar to the ones you heard in the parade ground, but slightly different. The first command will be to take care. Take care means to...
Take care.
Keep in mind the gun crews were like 16 to 22 years old, so it basically meant, listen up, you knuckleheads. The next command will be to make ready, at which point Corporal will light that cannon fuse. We are picked, primed, and ready to fire. If you have not started filming with your phones, if you want to, that would be the time to do it. Also, if you want to take photos, I suggest you use either burst mode, or if you want to take a single photo, if you're feeling brash and bold, hold your finger over the button to take the photo, but don't put it on it, because when this cannon goes off, you're going to flinch, your finger is going to hit that button, you're going to have a smile on your face and memories to last a lifetime. And the last command, folks, is probably the most obvious one again. Remember to use that 18th century vernacular. What is it?
Fire.
Give fire. Yes, give fire. Now, are we ready?
Ready.
Okay. Take care.
Boom.
Make ready. Give fire. Got that. Now, wait, his job isn't done yet. Keep in mind, we would not normally extinguish the linstock, but we don't want to burn this place down. A lot of smoke, folks. You mentioned
Oh,
17 of
thank
these
you.
What the corporal is going to do is he's going to take his worm screw again, and he's going to search the piece,
One
making
more.
sure all of the parts of that shot have been dispelled. How we doing, corporal? Good? Excellent. The next thing he's going to do is he's going to take a sponge, and yes, folks, he is sponge worthy. A sponge is basically a ramrod with a piece of sheep wool wrapped around the outside of it and soaked in a solution of water and vinegar. Water
Ang
helps
lakas.
extinguish any sparks. Vinegar helps break up all of that gunpowder residue there because it's an organic solvent. He's also going to swap
Vinegar
that
lang
over
yan.
all his bases.
Vinegar
And the
tsaka
very
ano.
last thing that he's going to do is he's going to take his ramrod and he's going to spring ram her one last time. There's the bell tone, folks. Now you can give him a round of applause. He's just done the job of Superman.
Yay! Thank you.
Now, a few last things, folks. If you actually want to see a 260-year-old cannon, look no further than right there. Because that is an example of a cannon that was recovered from a ship called the HMS Rue, which sunk off the coast of Key West in the 1750s. So it was not
1750s?
originally from this fort, but at least you can see what 200 years of saltwater corrosion will do to an iron
200
cannon.
years.
Now, if you folks want to see what an exploded or burst cannon looks like, I will allow you to go all the way down to the second window for me. That's the second window from where I'm standing. If you look through it, you can see an example of a burst cannon from this very fort. I cannot, however, folks, allow you to go all the way over to the Northwest Bastion over there because COVID restrictions. But don't worry, folks, because you have one of the most beautiful views of the South Basin of Lake Worth right over here. Now, with that, folks, that concludes our military demo. On behalf of the corporal and myself, I tip my bonnet to you. You've got a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Picture muna tayo dito bago alis.
Ano ba? Tapos na?
Picture muna.